Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Gambato Gaming. There have been a lot of great videos on YouTube covering bad endings in video games, whether they are particularly dark or plain out knee-slapping goofy. And today I want to start a new series of my own, wherein I take a look at particularly disturbing bad endings from video games. Much like the creepy Easter egg series I do here on the channel, I'd like to do several videos on this topic, as I've personally been affected by creepy bad endings like the Donkey Kong 64 bad ending, which I've spoke about on the channel before, and absolute anguish it's caused me since. Today I want to take a look at some of the more dark bad endings where the consequences of not winning and clutching it up are really punishing. We're talking death, disparity, body horror, and so much more as we take a look through these strangely dark, bad endings. For the most part, these are all endings you can get if you take a different route from the true ending, and these often negatively affect the characters of the game and sometimes even our game ending, causing a full restart. I am including a darker game over death sequence in today's video, and I do want to extend the series to also covering those as well, since they kind of lay in a similar vein. Now that those parameters are out of the way, I'd also like to invite anyone to leave their own bad endings in the comments down below. As usual, I might feature it in a future video. By the way, obvious spoiler warning ahead for all of these games, whether it be spoilers for the bad ending or the stories to the games and the endings themselves, since a lot of these take place around the end of the game. So if you don't want to be spoiled for any of the following games presented here on the screen, I recommend skipping over the entry with the video chapters. With that warning out of the way, let's hop in. Spider-Man vs. Kingpin was a pretty heavy hitter for Sega and Marvel back in the day, selling a promising amount when it was initially released on the Sega Genesis, selling over 2/3 of the entire Genesis player base. If you need any proof of the game's relevance in the early 90s, just take a look at how many ports of the game there were, including ports to the Master System, Game Gear, and even a definitive edition on the Sega CD. We'll be looking at the Sega CD version of the game, as it was the most fleshed out version and the only version that had a full motion animation for cutscenes. This actually added a lot of context that was missing in the original releases of the games, including a plethora of game over scenes, which all come off as pretty hilarious, all but for one game over scene. But for real, look at some of these game over scenes where Spider-Man loses to any number of the Sinister Six bosses. There is a unique cutscene of them dropping Spider-Man off on the front steps of the police station, even showing Spider-Man's limp body being dragged inside by two officers. My personal favorite is the one where Spider-Man is still sizzling from his failed fight with Electro. Boys, let him at least cool off, you know? He's gonna be hot to the touch. Jesus. Yeah, there's a lot of different endings here. They can even be categorized as being hospitalized, going to jail, being nuked, and being killed. You tell me which one's worse. Spider-Man is actually framed in this game for planting a nuke in the city, when in reality it was Kingpin, hence why Spider-Man is constantly being dropped off at the front door of the police station and not being fully killed by any member of the Sinister Six. The dark bad ending we're talking about today is actually two separate endings that can take place at the end of the game. One takes place if you are too late saving Mary Jane, causing her to be dipped in a big vat of acid, with the following cutscene playing out.
Mary Jane!
Yeah, I know you're thinking what I'm thinking, what everybody else is thinking. Spider-Man really delivered, really killed that Mary Jane line. That was so sick. For a really dark ending where his literal wife dies in front of him, he seems to be holding it together pretty nicely. The true dark ending happens if you die at the hands of Kingpin, in which you will be knocked out at the feet of Wilson Fisk. Before long, he hangs you up on the same hook as Mary Jane and slowly dunks the both of you into the acid bath, dissolving them into nothing. Yeah, they show this. As the screen fades out, all you hear is the jank laughter of Fisk and the deafening sound of a job not so well done, gotta say. But for real, a game where this occurs in one of the cutscenes, this is a pretty dark ending for Spider-Man and Mary Jane, or sans Spider-Man and just Mary Jane. Both are surprisingly disturbing, especially for a kid's Spider-Man game. I'll say this, man, Insomniac would never have the fucking kahunas to dip Mary Jane and Spider-Man in acid for a game over. I mean, all of the quick time events in Spider-Man 2 will just auto-complete by themselves if you don't succeed at them, which is just the lamest fucking shit. There was a lot of of opportunity for the game to get dark, or at least even imply darkness in the slightest bit if they didn't want to actually show anything. So yeah, this is way better, even if it is probably a little bit too dark for the game at hand. Danganronpa isn't the least likely game to house some more than dark content, I'll be the first to say that, but I don't think anyone was expecting the bad ending to the game. This happens during Chapter 5, in which you are meant to convict the character Kyoko of the murder, except she says otherwise, telling the player to simply trust her and not to convict her. Trust me bro, I didn't kill him. This, of course, is a hard decision because everyone in her position would say the same thing if she was actually guilty. But on the other hand, it's Kyoko, you know? She's one of the cooler characters in the game, at least to me, and she ends up feeling like one of the only lifelines the player has out of this hellhole. So if you go with your gut and not turn your back on a friend, even though all the evidence says otherwise, you'll get a good route in which Makoto, the main character, is executed. But in reality, it's not really him, but an alter ego. It's hard to explain, but basically this is the good route ending. This is what you want to go for. But if you end up not trusting Kyoko, you will convict her to death. The same death that we thought Makoto was almost subjected to, except this time it's a real fate for Kyoko. She is crushed to death, and the game bleakly cuts to the text that reveals the remaining students in the school simply stopped trying to get out, accepting their fate, and thus the murder stopped, and instead they found peace. And then the game cuts to this image, which shows the remaining students, including Makoto, all of which have individual children with Hina. This is pretty dark on many levels. One, considering the students lost all hope and just accepted the fact that this school and not being able to escape was their ultimate fate, and they lived the rest of their lives in there, creating their own families with the only female left at that point. Pretty big yikes here. Not only that, but we could see there is a picture of Toko, which represents the fact that beyond that point, she had since passed. Some believe since the picture doesn't have a large red X over it, it means she didn't really die, since that is usually a pretty good indicator in Peaks Academy if somebody did pass, but instead she was the one who ended up taking the infamous picture. In an off comment when asked about Toko's fate, Kodaka, the game's creator, simply explained she blew up. This should be taken for the humorous comment it is, the throwaway comment it is, but some have taken it to actually be canon, meaning she either exploded doing something inside the academy, or hell, she literally spontaneously combusted. Whatever the case, whatever's going on here, the phrase "an image speaks 1,000 words" was never truer than with this bad ending image. Makoto even has a mental spiral, realizing that this isn't actually the outcome he wanted, as he literally begins to question what hope is. It's a pretty interestingly dark outcome for the students of Peaks Academy, and stands out to be a bad ending that not many probably would have expected. Typically, you would expect the worst ending in a game about solving murders to be the whole crew, the whole gang gets killed, game over, rip. But in reality, the darkest outcome is them living, accepting their fate, trapped in the school. It also really reveals just how much Kyoko's back must have been hurting from carrying the whole damn group. I mean, it's almost hilarious how fast Makoto gives up after she dies. I've personally been coming around on roguelikes as a genre, especially as more and more come out that are trying to reinvent or add something new to the genre. A few of my favorite of this genre blend a formula that already works from established titles and blends elements of roguelike gameplay into them. For example, a game like Raven's Watch I've really been into recently, which blends typical roguelike gameplay you'd expect and Diablo's gameplay loop, and it works really well. Another one of these games that I've enjoyed that mixes two genres like this is Cult of the Lamb, which blends roguelike and base management gameplay, which ends up being really satisfying. You start building your base by collecting followers for your cult by going out into the wilds where the roguelike elements take place in the game. If you're a fan of roguelikes, you've probably played this game or at least heard about it, and if you haven't, then taking a look at the themes of the game, it's no surprise the game is a bit darker in its themes. I mean, you can literally sacrifice your followers, which actually becomes a gameplay element if you wish to forward your cult in some ways. The game is gory and it plays around with this humorously, but also takes itself seriously where it needs to. For example, the side quest where you interact with this shady fox dude for a few areas in the game, you have to blindly hand over some cult members to be sacrificed, all to complete another gem to unlock a fleece. Is this all really worth it, you're wondering? You'll really be feeling this when you come to the very end of the quest line where you are tasked with sacrificing your best friend Ratau, who the lamb befriends whilst playing the minigame Knuckle Bones, and he's one of the earliest characters you interact with in the game, and if you go through with it, the cutscene that plays is pretty devastating. I bring this up to say that this is one of the few times we see this reaction from the main cult leader Lamb. Most every other time he sacrifices his followers, he seems non-bothered, or sometimes even hell, he likes to, he seems to enjoy it. Except for Rata, you know, it's very depressing when you finish this quest line. But I think this plays into the philosophy of the bad ending of the game, which some players may even consider this the technical best ending. Let's dive a little deeper, let me explain what I'm talking about. Once reaching the final boss, the one who waits, you will be presented with all of your cult members imprisoned behind the giant and a choice. It is time for your lamb to make the ultimate sacrifice to the one who waits. What will you choose? Huh, punk? Well, if you refuse the offer, you'll be thrown into the final boss battle. But if you accept your fate, a pretty gruesome outcome for this cute little lamb will play out right in front of your eyes. Take a look. Wait, am I playing a video game, or did somebody slip on Paranormal Activity 3 and fast forward it right to the very end, huh? Yeah, the way your lamb ends up dying is, I don't know, it just feels accurate, like this is how it would actually go down, and how easy it would be to kill this lamb when it gives itself over. The sounds of the limbs cracking and the suddenness of the lamb falling over limp is particularly pretty dark to me, especially since at this point you spent several hours with this little guy running around being a badass. The other endings occur if you complete your fight with the one who waits, wherein he will transform into a follower that you can either kill or spare, adding them to the many followers of your cult. The only other ending is the game over you get when all of your followers have died at your base and you can no longer maintain a steady cult. Get out of here, son. You were never cut out to be a cult leader. There's a lot of discourse online about what the true bad ending is in the game, because some see this bad ending as actually the best outcome for the lamb. This is due to the idea that the lamb's story is tragic from the very beginning of the game, and this ending is actually acting as a sorta mercy kill for the lamb. Many believe this might be the case because this can't be a way to live, especially if you were forced into it. And while it's fair to say we don't truly know the feelings of the lamb, when we consider the death of Ratau, it brings to mind that maybe this isn't a soulless little lamb after all, and the burden of running a cult is kind of weighing on him. It's a really interesting theory that confirms even more that no matter how cute the game appears, it's truly a dark, tragic tale of a little lamb partaking in the hardest choices anyone would have to make. Truly the best cult simulator on the market still to this day. Go get it. It's fun. The first few Fallout games are definitely of their time, whether that be in the gameplay department or the FMV-styled visuals that have aged greatly in my opinion. I don't know what it is about this old art style, but it always adds an essence of dread to these games it's featured in for me. This art style really helped add to the absolute desolate feeling the Fallout games were going for, especially the first two. Like in later entries, the first Fallout relies heavily on making good decisions through large dialogue routes and options with every character. This means that the game set itself up to have multiple endings and opportunities to keep going through the game to see everything it has to offer. Of the multiple endings that are all a little tragic in their own rights, there is a definitive bad ending. If you are a true loyalist and enemy of the super mutant army, but hey, if your heart's not in it and was never there in the fight to begin with, then this ending might be the best outcome for you. But if you bought into the story and wanted to see the good ending, giving up the vault to the super mutants likely isn't on your itinerary while playing Fallout 1. Not only is it a pretty messed up decision to have to make in the first place, but if you do go through with it, you'll get a a pretty messed up couple of cutscenes that close out the game. For starters, your character is slowly transformed into a super mutant through means of dunking him in acid, which looks all but comfortable. Unfortunately, they don't have a cutscene where you slowly reveal your new super mutant face like the Joker reveal scene in Batman 89. That's sorely lacking here. I want to see my guy looking like a straight super mutant G. But they do have a scene that shows what remained of the vault getting taken over by the super mutants, including all of the other vault members meeting a pretty grisly fate. It all takes place over security cameras, and for some reason, in my opinion, this makes it even more menacing. It really feels like you're hopeless to help the remaining friends you had at the vault, and you have to endure the consequences of your decision from afar, over a camera. You can't even see the shit in color. It's on a CCTV. Not only that, but it's straight up intimidating the way the super mutants carry out their attack. All out relentlessness, shooting down hallways, maiming, and the whole nine. The only hope is the last scene where it cuts to the Overseer in a giant mechanized machine gun, and we can see him, he definitely hit a few of the super mutants. And for a moment, it seems like he's winning, but soon he's swarmed, and the last thing we see and hear is the guy getting beat to death before the game simply cuts back to the main menu. No credits, no nothing. You don't get shit. All you get is the trauma of your decision, buddy. It's gotta feel terrible to get this ending unless you are an absolute masochist. Even then, you never get the satisfaction of actually seeing your character as a super mutant, so there really is no payoff except seeing your whole vault get swarmed. It just goes to show the absolute power super mutants have when in large packs. I mean, one alone is bad enough for me when I'm playing Fallout, but this is like a swarm of ants taking down a cricket. You know what I'm saying? Maybe not a cricket with machine guns. There you go. Dude, this ending was ruthless, and I'm all here for it. I really am. Clocktower is a series I've always been interested in from afar, being a fan of horror games, but never had a chance to play as the first entry was localized to Japan only and released on the Super Famicom. The game was then re-released globally in 1996 on the PS1, followed by 2 sequels, but I never had a PS1, so I was unfortunately never able to experience this game. If you're unfamiliar, Clocktower is a point-and-click horror series that seems to be very much of its time because of its sluggish, ancient gameplay. But if you're patient and into these types of games, then this should be played, because it was one of the earliest examples of a point-and-click horror game becoming successful on a home console like the Super Famicom. The game had a few interesting mechanics like the panic mode, which the game would switch to when the player became too frightened. In this mode, the main character Jennifer is harder to control as they're freaking out, like an overly leveled Pokemon your friend traded you. She just ain't listening. Other than this mechanic, the game, it pretty much is your typical point-and-click horror game fleshed out with puzzles to solve and enemies to run and hide from. The main enemy in the Clocktower series is somewhat infamous for being absolutely terrifying. His name is Scissorman, and he's a short king that runs around the mansion with a large pair of scissors, or I guess they're shears at this size. The game has aged amazingly with superb pixel art still holding up with insane enemy designs. I mean, I really can't get over some of these designs. I would have shit myself if I played this back in the day. Plus, things like the character's face panel changing expressions, especially of anguish, really adds a layer of fear to the game that it wouldn't have had otherwise, I think. Like many games that this game inspired, the game has multiple different endings split into different letter grades, with the latter half all being bad endings. There's a few of the bad endings that stick out to me as to being the darkest for this character, but to be honest, most of the bad endings could take the cake. I mean, they usually all end in death. Endings E, F, and H stand out to many, and to me, to be the particularly creepy and darkest endings in the game. Ending E sees Jennifer getting inside an elevator, and after traveling up a few floors, the elevator powers down, leaving the player in darkness. The next moment, you hear eerie laughter before the Scissorman drops down out of the elevator shaft onto the player, and the game cuts to the credits before we see what happens. But due to the loud, sharp screams we hear as it cuts, we can only assume the worst. Ending F ends off even earlier in the same elevator section, as when you enter the elevator, it doesn't even cut to the inside of the elevator. Instead, we get to hear Jennifer scream and sounds of her being attacked, and blood slowly begins to pour out of the elevator. The last ending I want to mention here is Ending H, which features Jennifer actually escaping in a car, and she seems to have fully gotten away with her life. That is until it cuts to the rear view mirror, which shows the scissors from the Scissor Man pop up in her back seat, meaning this ending spelt death for her as well. Damn, she can't catch a fucking break. Sure, the majority of bad endings do end with Jennifer losing her life in a number of ways, and thus, I had a pretty hard time nailing down which one was the darkest in my opinion. But I think you could see all of these as extremely messed up for this character. She's an orphan, least us forget orphan death. If you've ever played the game, which was your favorite of the bad endings? Let me know in the comments. The Uncharted series is divided into two eras of Naughty Dog, being pre-Last of Us and post-Last of Us, and Uncharted 4 clearly shows how much the company had matured since the last entry. That's not to say there isn't darker, more stressful moments in the first three Uncharted games, but the tone of Uncharted 4 versus 3 is much different, lacking things like the goofy, overly animated ragdoll effects for the first three games, making for much more realistic deaths for the characters. This entry is technically just a death in the game and not a bad ending, but if you consider unique deaths to also be bad endings, then just indulge me in this entry. Now, you could technically choose any number of deaths from throughout the game, since a lot of them are edging on the side of being gruesome, but I find the darkest to be at the end of the game during the final boss battle with Rafe. During this segment, you are fighting Rafe in a sword fight on an old burning pirate ship, making for a real spectacle of a final boss fight. I'll give him that. Too bad it was left up to being a quick time event fest, but it does give opportunities to see some of the more morbid ways Nathan Drake can lose his life. A lot of these have Nate dying off screen with the camera focusing on Rafe's stabbing movements, but some of them show a bit more than you might expect from your typical Uncharted game. Take this one for example, where we can almost see the life drain from his eyes, which is even more fucked up since the game has made a stink about Nathan retiring from this lifestyle. Knowing that it ended in this way at the very end of the line is definitely dark to think about. Also, knowing what happens in the epilogue of the game and knowing it would never happen because Nate got stabbed to death by an ancient pirate sword is depressing as hell, but would have been pretty bittersweet, especially since the game was originally supposed to be a little bit more darker in tone, with Nate's brother Sam coming back for revenge on Nate, acting as the main villain of the game. So I feel like if we got that Uncharted 4, perhaps we would have seen the line being pushed even more than this, which it's already depressingly realistic in this game, especially compared to some of the earlier game deaths. I mean, is this guy even human, or does his DNA change to paper or something when he dies, allowing him to be thrown through the air at insane speeds? What the hell's going on? SOS was a game on the Super Nintendo that coincidentally was developed by the same company who made Clocktower, Human Entertainment, and depicts a side-scrolling platformer game of sorts where you can play as 4 different characters, all attempting to survive upon a sinking traveler boat, a big ship. Titanic type beat. Yeah, this was the closest thing you could have played back in the day to get the Titanic sinking simulator experience, and apparently the game is pretty good and well regarded, and apparently holds up today compared to the other games of this era, ones that were taking risks such as S.O.S. Much like Clocktower, this game has a lot of opportunities for endings, not only because you have 4 different character paths you can choose and experience, but they each have different letter grades for endings, each representing a different ending. Obviously, your S endings will be your best endings for your characters, and the D endings is the lowest you can obtain, which results in death for each of the 4 characters. Off rip, no matter what ending you get, whether it be S or D, you'll still get to see over 2,000 people perish in a sinking boat behind you, which is already tragic. But if you happen to be on the ship when it goes down, the endings end up showing some depressing ass scenes. Some of these scenes that stand out to me are the following 3, but there are a lot of cool endings to this game worth seeing if you are interested. For the sake of time, I picked out the 3 darkest endings to me from the game, and they each take place with a different character. Starting with Jeffrey Howell, who is a doctor who was traveling on the boat with his wife Adela. During the main gameplay, you have a choice to save other passengers, and who you choose to leave with will determine your letter grade and your ending, so for this rank C, you will need to leave with passengers, but not your wife, Adela. Pretty big oversight, but let's see what happens. A rescue party will arrive asking Jeffrey if he knew any other passengers stuck on board. He then explains his wife is still on board and tries to go back for her before the crew forcibly drag Jeffrey away while he yells his wife's name. I mean, it's sad for sure, right? But you still could have rescued your wife while you had the chance, Jeffrey. Next we have is the rank D ending for the character Capri Wisher, who is an architect and is traveling with his sister Amy. For this ending, you will need to leave with Amy but have less than 25 passenger points. In this ending, Capri will be stuck inside the ship, realizing there is no way out to safety. He goes to check the hole on the side of the ship with no luck and wonders how long they can hold out, before long returning to the group of passengers, including his sister Amy, who has now passed out. Capri then rushes to his sister's aid as the scene fades out before showing an image of the ship sunken in the night sky, which is a common theme with all the bad endings in the game. Yeah, this one's pretty dark, just shows the last moments of a couple siblings who didn't make it. Perhaps the most shocking ending comes from playing as Luke Haynes, who is a crew member on the ship and has a bad feeling about setting sail beforehand. During the C rank ending, requiring you to leave with the captain of the ship, but again, less than 25 passenger points, the captain will stop Luke from going back to rescue more passengers by pulling a fucking gun on him. Yeah, this actually happens, exclaiming it's over for him and that he wants to at least take Luke with him if he's going to shoot himself. Before another moment, the captain shoots and kills Luke in cold blood before the game fades out to the same sunken ship ending. This is by far the most shocking ending, I think, in my opinion, but it's just as dark as any of the other bad endings in the game because it ends in pure, unadulterated death. The unique ideas this game introduced feels like human entertainment testing out their consequence systems they'd later introduce into Clocktower and other games, making this one of the most influential hidden gems on the Super Nintendo, and one I had never heard of before this, but is one I do want to go back to and experience for myself one day, hopefully soon. And that'll be it for today's episode, and next time we will take a look at even more dark bad endings to video games. Again, if you have any you personally experienced that you think would make a good entry for a video, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.